This video is sponsored by PlayStation, but more on that in a minute. We just got our hands on the new Revision Zero exotic pulse rifle. It's a unique one, but I wonder, how does it match up against every other exotic pulse rifle in Destiny 2? Well, in this video, we're going to rank every single exotic pulse rifle for both PvP and PvE. The first exotic on our list is Bad Juju. It's in the kinetic slot and it has a unique trait that gives you extra damage and extra super energy on kills, and also reloads the gun for you. On paper, this sounds like an extraordinary proposal. It's one of the rare weapons in the game which actively helps you towards your next super, which is always welcome no matter what kind of mode you're playing. Despite that, it's still not all that good compared to the competition. Sure, you're going to get your super slightly faster, but if you're slaying out enough for it to really matter, you're probably already going to be the first one in PvP to get your super anyway. And being a lightweight frame, it's not that easy to get a kill in the first place compared to some of the other archetypes. That remains true for both input devices. The damage profile is just not all that good, plain and simple. If you manage to get the perk rolling, it can occasionally be pretty entertaining in 6v6, but I don't think that makes it an especially good gun. It's fine, but really not all that great. That's why I'll rank it in the C tier for PvP on both mouse and keyboard and controller. In PvE, String of Curses providing extra damage and auto-reloading is nice in content where you can kill ads quickly enough to keep that perk going, but the real benefit is the faster super regeneration. This can help you build supers a lot faster and perform more special finishers, or get that next Well of Radiance or bubble going just a bit faster, which can be a lifesaver in tougher content. But compared with all the other great pulses on this list with even more beneficial perks, I'm going to put this one in the B tier for PvE. I wanted to thoroughly test each of these pulse rifles on both mouse and keyboard as well as controller to see how they felt different for each input device. And since I'm generally more of a mouse and keyboard player these days, I wanted to specifically thank PlayStation for sending me one of their new DualSense Edge wireless controllers to try out, as well as for sponsoring the video. If you haven't seen one of these yet, it's a brand new controller designed for high performance with an insane ability to customize it to fit your exact playstyle. You can change out the stick caps, remap all the inputs to work best for whatever game you want to play, and tweak a ton of the fine little details. For example, you can tweak your stick sensitivity and your dead zones and also set the travel distance of the triggers. In FPS games like Destiny, I think it makes the most sense to have a really shallow trigger stop point so that you can fire your gun as fast as possible, but if you're playing something like a racing game, you might want longer trigger pulls for more precise control. I really love the mappable buttons on the backside of the controller. Whenever I play an FPS game, I like to never take my thumbs off the sticks if I can avoid it. This way, whether I'm in the air or reviving a teammate, I can keep aiming at whatever enemies are on screen. I also really like that you can replace the stick modules, since that's often something that gets worn down faster on controllers. If you want to try one out for yourself, you can check out the link in the description for more info on how to pick one up. Collective Obligation is another highly unique exotic pulse rifle, this time coming from the Vow of the Disciple raid. It's gated behind a steep wall of RNG and it's a tough one to get, which makes it all the more interesting to rank. So is Collective Obligation worth your time? Well, if you're looking for a pulse rifle specifically to use in PvP, probably not. See, the perk requires you to land shots on debuff targets, and against other players, that's kind of a tall order. You're going to have to use at least one ability just to create that debuff in the first place, and then you need to land shots on that exact player to get progress towards your perk. To me, this is just too much work for too little reward. You're better off just getting a basic 390 with kill clip or rampage, and you're going to have a much better time in PvP, trust me. And this is why the Collective Obligation lands in the D tier. It's just not enough juice for the squeeze. As a note, you definitely want to be running the ornament in Finality if you have it, which drastically improves how easy it is to see targets while you're aiming down sights. In PvE, the exotic perk is far easier to activate thanks to the higher enemy density. When you're playing in a team that has multiple void users, soaking up those debuffs and reapplying them to new enemies is a really fun and effective gameplay loop. Although it's only useful with void subclasses, so it does have some natural limitations. So I'm going to rank this one in the A tier for PvE. Oh, Gravlands. This was once the king of PvP back in Season 3, but now it just feels left behind. The lance, with its unique and also uniquely bad damage model for PvP, has a horrible 1 second time to kill, and that's for landing all headshots. Compare that to something like the Messenger, which can offer you a blazing fast 0.67 second time to kill with the exact same accuracy requirement while boosting better overall stats and perks. The unlimited range of the bigger bullet is definitely an interesting feature, but unless you're on an absolutely huge map, it feels rarely worth using. There's just simply stronger options for pretty much any range engagement out there. And the collateral kills are really fun whenever you can pull them off, but again, it's just kind of a difficult gun to get kills with in the first place. So in PvP, Graviton's going right into the D tier. Fortunately for PvE, the explosions offered by Graviton are much more effective. It can become a pretty viable ad clearing weapon, although the secrets can be a little bit inconsistent at times. It still doesn't offer all that much in terms of pure DPS, but if you have a lot of red bars out there that need to be blown up with void bombs, it's pretty fun to use. So for PvE, I'm going to put this one in the B tier. Now, taking a sharp turn from the deep depths of the tier list, our next contender is No Time to Explain. Now, I do technically have time to explain this one, but do I really need to? If you've been playing any PvP whatsoever, you're bound to have encountered the No Time. Having the best damage model of all pulse rifle archetypes paired with an absolutely busted intrinsic perk means it's been plaguing PvP for many seasons in a row. Its stats are extremely good for the archetype even after the nerfs, and it also comes with a lower zoom scope, which makes it a little bit easier to find your targets. Sure, that does make No Time slightly worse in the range department, but the exotic perk spawns an autonomous turret which makes up for any lost damage at range. Speaking of the perk, the only thing you need to do to proc it is just land a few headshots, and this is exactly why No Time is so busted. Despite its multiple nerfs, the fundamentally powerful perk secures No Time a top spot in our list all the way up in the S tier. When it comes to PvE though, it offers a lot less. The ammo refund on critical hit or slowed target is definitely nice, but there's just so many other ways to reload quickly in Destiny. The mini turret is also definitely nice to have, but it's just not nearly as effective as it is in the Crucible. So for PvE, we're going to rank this one in the C tier. Just like our other entries, this next one is pretty unique. The Outbreak Perfected is the only gun overflowing with the power of Siva. It's a lightweight frame in terms of its damage model, which isn't too good by itself, but I do think there's a saving grace for Outbreak. Bungie recently disclosed that they specifically coded Outbreak with the recoil of an auto rifle, which behaves slightly differently than a pulse. See, every time you fire a pulse, you're essentially going to feel that same recoil from one burst to the next. However, with auto rifles, they reduce the recoil as long as you hold down the trigger, and Outbreak does the same thing. Pay close attention to the background footage here. Do you see how Outbreak is getting more and more stable the more I shoot it? You can definitely feel this on both mouse and keyboard and controller. This makes for an incredibly satisfying user experience and a really consistent pulse rifle. Plus, whenever you manage to get a kill, you'll produce a swarm of those nanites that start to attack your next nearby enemy. These don't deal a ton of damage by themselves, but it can be enough to slightly improve your time to kill depending on the resilience level, and it also works kind of like Thorn, where the damage ticks prevent a res in trials or from pulling ammo. The nanites can also be generated by landing consecutive headshots, but this isn't as simple as you might think in PvP. You're going to need a lot of headshots in order for the nanites to form. Against a regular health guardian, you're going to get the kill the normal way before the nanites ever get generated from headshots. So the headshot generated nanites only really work in specific scenarios like against a roaming super or someone who's in a well of radiance. But in this scenario, do you really want to be standing there plinking away with your pulse rifle? I think I would just run away. Either way, it's a nice benefit to have that just helps you get that next target kill a little bit easier. So despite its worst damage model compared to some of the other pulse rifles on the list, I'm going to give Outbreak the benefit of the doubt and rank it up in the B tier. To me, it's definitely not good enough for the A tier, but it's not a bad gun either, and it's really fun to shoot. For PvE though, this is a completely different story. This thing was the go-to strategy for boss DPS a while back in Destiny 2 history, and even today it remains a pretty viable option for fights that require a ton of total damage dealt where special and heavy ammo can start to run dry. It has infinite damage scaling and it scales really well with others in your group. The nanites deal a ton of damage to tanky bosses and it's a great pick overall, so for PvE we're going to rank this thing up in the S tier. And the last pulse rifle before we get to the new Revision 0 is the Vigilance Wing. This one's potentially the most unique of them all because it fires a whopping 5 bullets per burst, and that's basically the exotic perk in a nutshell. Lots and lots of bullets fired downrange in quick succession. Besides that, it also gives you some benefits in team situations. Whenever someone dies, you're going to get a burst of healing and increased movement speed. If you're the last living member of your fire team, it's going to perform even better. By how much exactly? Well, to be honest, I don't really know. Shout out to Bungie for their illuminating perk descriptions. The main attraction for Vigilance Wing in PvP though is that unique damage model. It allows you to land a kill with just 5 headshots and 5 body shots. That's a measly 50% accuracy requirement for the optimal time to kill, which is just really good for pulse rifles. For reference, the high impact pulse rifles require 5 out of 6 bullets to be crits and potentially even all 6 if your opponent has high enough resilience. It's a great pulse overall and definitely deserving of a spot up in the A tier for PvP. Pro tip by the way, just like Collective Obligation, if you want to perform really well with this thing, you want a specific ornament. You should be looking for the Vigil of Saint 14 ornament, which dramatically improves the looks while aiming down sights. It's pretty hard to use the original model once you get used to how clean this ornament looks. For PvE, the Vigilance Wing really doesn't provide all that much value. I suppose the healing is nice if a teammate goes down, but there's so many other ways to heal these days that that's almost a non-factor, and it's definitely not worth running over the significantly better exotic pulse rifles on this list. So we're going to drop the Vigilance Wing down to the D tier for PvE. Okay, here we go, Revision 0. This is the new aggressive frame pulse rifle in the kinetic slot, which coincidentally is also the only craftable one on this list. You get to choose whether you want to fire 2 or 4 shots at a time, but for most situations I would suggest you stick with the 4-shot option. It's going to progress you towards that perk much faster. Sure, the 2-bullet burst option does have more range, but it doesn't give you as much perk progress and it doesn't give you that ultra fast 2 burst time to kill. For the random perk, I would go with moving target for PvP. You want to buff up that aim assist for pulse rifles as much as possible. Alternatively, elemental capacitor, Eye of the Storm, and perpetual motion are all really great choices as well. Stats wise, I would aim for 100 recoil direction no matter what input device you're on. Fitted stock is a great pick here for that flat plus 20 recoil, and according to the in-game stats, Revision Zero has a base 85 recoil direction, making fitted stock a perfect choice. For the barrel and mag, I would go for max range while keeping just enough stability to make you feel comfortable while aiming it. And personally, I go with under pressure for the other perk option. For the exotic perk, well, on paper it looks even deadlier than No Time to Explain. Just by landing headshots, you get progress towards Hunter's Trace. You can see that little bar on the left side of your screen slowly filling up. You really need quite a few headshots to get that perk primed, and you can see where the 4 dividers are for each of the shots you build up. Once you reach at least 1 bar of progress, you'll be able to swap modes. Revision gets a fancy scope and lets you channel your inner aimbot because this bad boy is now a real sniper rifle powerful enough to even insta-kill a roaming super. One thing that surprised me is you're even able to swap weapons after activating the perk and you won't lose it, but you are stuck in that sniper mode until you use up all of your shots. And of course, if you whiff those, you're right back to the ordinary version of the gun without much to show for your efforts. And now we've hit the main problem on the head. Yes, in theory, Revision Zero has the deadlier perk, but it's so much harder to make use of most of the time. Realistically, in PvP, you're only ever going to get maybe 1 or 2 shots loaded, and if you miss them, all of your work has gone to waste. You also have to commit to the perk before the engagement even starts by swapping modes. Plus, even after you shoot that sniper bullet, it takes a moment to swap back to the normal fire mode, which can get you killed if you're under pressure. And this is why I still think that No Time is a slightly more versatile gun overall, although Revision is definitely a very good weapon, so I'm going to rank it up in the A tier for PvP. For PvE, Revision Zero has intrinsic anti-barrier rounds, which immediately makes it a top contender for endgame PvE activities. Additionally, it's so much easier to take advantage of the exotic perk when there's so many more enemies around. The sniper mode is also really nice to have. It's almost like having an extra special weapon to deal with those nasty barrier champions and the yellow bar mobs out there. Plus, you can craft it with 4th Times a Charm and Vorpal Weapon, which are both fantastic PvE perks. So we're going to rank this one up in the S tier for PvE. If you like this breakdown, consider subscribing if you haven't already. And up next, check out my video ranking every single hand cannon in a tier list for PvP. It's linked on screen and in the description.